Real quick before the video starts, if you love sports, subscribe to us. We post daily on This Day in Sports videos, documentaries, our weekly podcast, and more.
Welcome into our reactions from episodes 1 and 2 of the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary. Ryan and Scotty are here to break it down, to the guys from the Semi-Pro podcast. Let's get right into it. First off, Scotty, I just want to give your initial reactions, my initial reactions. What did you think of the first 2 episodes of the Last Dance documentary?
Okay, well, first impressions are it was awesome. Like, just hearing the story of Michael Jordan from a kid to his early days with the Bulls in the mid-'80s to the late '90s with everything falling apart. And we're really just kind of getting into everything. Part 2 just ended with Scottie Pippen demanding the trade. So we're really just kind of getting into the thick of this thing. But I loved it. It was super awesome, and I cannot wait for part 3. I don't even really know when it's going to come out, but I can't wait.
It's next Sunday. I think it's every Sunday.
All right.
So every Sunday there's going to be a Last Dance doc. And what I thought of this is they really just shat on Jerry Krause.
They made him seem like such a bad guy.
This was 2 hours of just watching Jerry Krause be absolutely shat on by everyone. It didn't matter if it was Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr. Everyone just took an absolute dump on this guy. I thought it was hilarious. He did an amazing job assembling the team, but he was such a terrible personality that everyone just hated this guy so much with such a passion.
Well, I mean, here's the deal. It's kind of hard not to hate a guy who wants to blow up a team that has won 5 championships in the last 7 years and get rid of, I don't think we need to debate this, the greatest coach in NBA history. Like, I mean, it's really hard not to have a lot of contempt for a guy who wants to do that and end the team in that way. And a guy like Michael who wants to compete at all costs, no matter what, that's obviously not going to fly with him. And they totally mishandled the Scottie Pippen situation. Scottie could have handled it better too, but the Bulls management did not handle that well. So they made him out to be a very unlikable person. Like we talked about in our last podcast. Me and you were not alive to see this run in person. So we're really just getting the taste of what we knew beforehand and what we see in this documentary. I didn't know much about Krause going into this, but he just does not seem like a likable person. And it's no wonder he didn't get another job after Chicago.
Well, you led a little bit into the Scottie Pippen and how he handled that situation at the start of the season. That was a really interesting thing. Just, I would have never fathomed a player to have essentially season-ending surgery, or at least ending a majority of his season with foot surgery that he could have had at the end of last year and it would have just been fine. But he wanted to wait so that he could enjoy his summer.
Yeah.
And
what it came down to was the money thing, right? I mean, he was horribly underpaid, but
yeah, 122nd in the NBA when the graphic popped up on the screen. First in assists, first in steals, second in points, second in rebounds, second in minutes played.
First or second in every major category on the team. And if Michael wasn't on the team, Scottie would have been a top 3 scorer in the NBA easily.
Yeah, and it was laughable to me and to everyone else really too, how I saw a little bit on Twitter and on Instagram the reactions to this, and everyone was just clowning the fact that Scottie was 122nd, and rightfully so. He is a great player and really deserves to be paid more than that. So I thought that was super interesting as well. And then when he was out, one of the most funny parts to me was Michael Jordan just screaming at anyone at practice who was doing really anything. He was just yelling at, whether it was Tony Kukoc, I think it was Paxton in there, Ron Harper he was screaming at. Everyone was getting Michael Jordan's full wrath. And that's just the competitive nature of Mike.
Yeah, we've heard the stories of Mike being the ultra competitor, of him lashing out at guys in practice. And I don't even think that we have gotten to see the full wrath of Mike in this documentary. I think there's a lot worse things to come in terms of like talking about his bad side and his competitive nature, if you want to define that as bad. But he is an intense ass dude. in every practice clip they showed, he was all over his teammates, trying to make them better 24/7. And Michael's leadership style worked. There's no getting around it.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I do think it will get worse for sure.
Yeah.
Let's jump back a little bit to the beginning of the doc. They went to Paris. Another one of the things that I thought was absolutely hilarious was the dude who was putting on his microphone. I don't know if you caught this, but the dude who put on his microphone then tried to get him to sign something.
Oh, yeah, and Michael just
bodyguard.
Michael's just like, look at the bodyguard like, take care of this motherfucker, man.
That was hilarious. And then everywhere he went, David Stern was like an ultimate fanboy of Michael Jordan in Paris, along with every single other person in that entire country. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it really just goes to show how much of a global superstar and icon Michael was. And when people want to talk about the GOAT debate, I mean, we're not going to get into this too much. Trust me, that's a whole other conversation. But when people want to try to get into the GOAT debate, one of the things I talk about was how much of an icon Michael was, known around the world, swarmed by people wherever he went, basketball fan or not. And I don't think we're ever going to see another player that has that same kind of recognizability and marketability.
Absolutely. The one small problem I had with this first two parts of the doc was the timeline. I think.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a fan of it either.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I looked at and I was just a bit perplexed by. I get they're trying to tell the story of that final championship run, and it's hard to jump in and out like that when you're trying to tell a story of one season, but you have to establish some backstory.
Yeah.
But so let's jump back sort of like they did a little bit to his days in college or in high school, or really both, whatever you see fit. I thought that entire thing was really interesting. First, in high school, we all have known the cliche story of like the it shows up so often of the never give up. You never know what you'd amount for. Michael Jordan wasn't on varsity in high school, or
his sophomore year he got put on JV. Oh my
goodness, he's never gonna amount to anything. I thought that was, I mean, you had to establish that backstory, but his freshman year really being the flip of the switch for him, where he hit that game-winning shot to win the national championship, and then it was, oh, Michael Jordan can do this. Michael Jordan, you could see himself grow with the swagger, because he started out
he talked about, Ryan, sorry to interrupt, but he talked about after he hit that shot, he went from Mike Jordan to Michael Jordan. Like, he became a man after that shot.
Yeah, and you could really see it, especially with the timeline that they used. You could see from him in high school and in college and his first year in the NBA of him being this sort of humble, shy type of kid who just wanted to play basketball. His dorm was like a college dorm. And then you jump forward and he's smoking a cigar, drinking some whiskey or some scotch or whatever it was. And he has a type of swagger about him with the one earring that it really just wasn't there in his first few years of being in the public eye. And I thought that weird personal growth jumping so quickly was actually sort of eye-opening. I thought it was pretty cool.
I mean, yeah, so like you said, we got to see Michael Jordan back at UNC. He was a tremendous college player, and he had attention coming out of high school, had attention at UNC, but that shot really was the transformation from Mike to Michael. And I think this documentary did a really good job of highlighting that. And I liked how they talked with James Worthy in that quote that James Worthy gave about, I was better than Michael for about 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks.
I think that really spoke to Michael's competitive drive. He was always competitive. They talked about his relationship with his brothers playing pickup games. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But I think it kind of took another step up at UNC when he had that conversation with Dean Smith about being the hardest worker on the team. And I think kind of the man Michael Jordan was reborn at UNC. And I think we should all be thankful that that's where Michael decided to go to college, because we may not be looking at the same player without that.
Without a doubt. As controversial as it was a few weeks ago when he got voted the best college athlete of all time, he was never a bad college athlete, and he was one of the best of all time. And that really showed itself in the doc. It showed his growth for sure. You mentioned his brothers and his early family life. I'll touch on that a little bit. Him and his brother Larry, their competition really showing that competitive drive of Michael fighting for their father's attention. That was really the embodiment of Michael Jordan, and how Michael's been so competitive throughout his entire life. And that was really the start of it right there, competing with his brothers.
Yeah, so we talked about how he kind of took that next step up at UNC, but I found it really interesting and kind of a relatable moment in the documentary when Michael was talking about trying to win his father's affection and how his father would sometimes lash out on him when he didn't do stuff, chores, and even stuff in sports right. Sometimes the relationship wasn't the best, and I feel like especially as men, we can all relate to that strive to get the approval from your father. And the fact that so much of Michael's competitive nature at an early age was based off that, I think that's just a really relatable thing. And it reminds us of the fact that Mike was a kid just like all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I want to touch on this going into the NBA draft, sort of to flash back a little bit after his days at UNC. Going into the NBA draft, I thought it was hilarious how Walt Frazier and Mark Eaton were just short shaming Michael Jordan for being 6'6".
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's small.
Well, I mean, we got to keep in mind, though, in the 70s and early 80s NBA, it really was a big man's league for a long time. There were great guards like Jerry West, Walt Frazier, those types. I mean, Walt Frazier was one of the guys that they showed the close up. I thought that was kind of funny. But, there were guards that were great, but there were none that were able to be that kind of transcendent presence like a Wilt or a Bill Russell or a Kareem. And if you think about it, Mike really was the first guard to kind of be that best player in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's jump all the way to the end of the doc and with Michael's injury, where he hurt his foot, he broke his foot, and then he came back without the organization knowing, and he was playing 5-on-5 with just pickup basketball.
I think that's another thing that just speaks to his great competitive nature, right? Like, he couldn't even, this is another relatable thing because we're all sitting in quarantine doing nothing. Michael couldn't take not being out there, not competing, not getting better, not doing the thing he loved most. And it was really crazy to see what he did. Because if you think about it, if you think about Zion going back to Duke while he was sitting at the beginning of the season, oh my goodness, the Pelicans ownership and management would have a heart attack. And I'm sure the Bulls management did as well. They kind of talked about that. But it's just stuff that wouldn't happen in this day and age. So it also kind of shows the time gap. The 90s doesn't feel like that long ago, or in mid 80s, I guess, when that was happening for Jordan, 86, 87. But
yeah, I think it was then. I think it was.
It just shows how much the NBA has evolved too, because now they have constant surveillance and wraps on top of these players. They're young guys who they have so much invested in. And Mike was just off at UNC playing some pickup games with a almost career-ending injury.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And then when he got back, the 14-minute shot clock where it was you had the timer, and if it went over 14, not a second on the floor.
It kind of hurt my heart a little bit to see them in a pivotal game with the playoffs on the line with 30 seconds left saying, get out of the game, Mike. I mean, I'm a competitive guy, but I'm nowhere near Michael, and I cannot imagine how he was feeling in that place. I just worked my ass off this whole entire game. I'm the only reason my team is in the game. I went out here, I played crazy, played some of the best basketball of my career so far, and they're going to take me out because of a 10% chance I re-injure this foot?
Yeah, and then I thought it was hilarious after the game where they just lock Jerry Krause out of the locker room.
Oh, I know. Jerry Krause seems like he was a decent GM. You have to be to assemble a team with Jordan, Rodman, Pippen, Longley, all those guys. So he had a good team, but I just don't know how they put up with that personality for so long based off the way they characterized him. I mean, it is a documentary, so we do have to keep in mind that whoever's telling this story, I forget the name of the director, he's doing a great job, by the way.
Fantastic job.
We are perceiving these people how they want us to perceive them.
Yeah, and then sort of sticking with that foot injury, the Celtics series, they got clobbered, but with no fault of Michael Jordan. I mean, the documentary is about him. Of course, he's going to be tremendous in what they show, but 49 and then 63? What?
Yeah. No, and I remember. Do you remember 2K11 when they had that Jordan challenge?
Oh yeah.
And one of the challenges was going out and dropping 63 with Michael Jordan, and I could never do it. Like
It was,
that's how hard it was. I couldn't
and that's
do
the
it in a
point. It's
video game.
impossible.
Like,
It's
yeah,
impossible to do it.
and that Celtics team was so good. I wasn't even really aware that they had Walton on that team too. He would have been in the twilight of his career, but they had Walton, they had Parrish, they had Bird, they had McHale. I mean, that was a loaded squad, and Michael did the best he could. And here's another thing that I just want to touch on real quick. A lot of people, when you're talking about the GOAT argument, again, we won't get too far into that. That's a never-ending rabbit hole. But a lot of people like to say, okay, LeBron, he lost all these finals straight, but look at how many times Michael Jordan lost in the playoffs before he got to the finals. Well, he was facing these great teams like this loaded Celtics team, who Larry Bird, one of the top 10 players in NBA history, top 3 small forward of all time, said, yeah, that was our best team ever. And Michael Jordan in his second year in the league was dominating them with not a lot of a team around him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then those are all the notes that I took on both of these 2 episodes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I love Michael Jordan. I think that is, I mean, my whole life I had been such a LeBron fan that I kind of was in denial to watch Michael Jordan tape or see how great he was or research or anything. And in these past couple of years, I've kind of shifted my, I don't even know what you want to call it, my Metrodome over to the Michael Jordan side. So I've researched, I've watched the games, I've watched the highlights, and Michael Jordan was the ultimate competitor, the ultimate athlete, the ultimate basketball player. And I don't think we're ever going to see anything like him again.
All right. Well, that's all we got for our reaction of the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance doc.
Looking forward to part 3. It'll be really fun.
We'll try to be back next week, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, we will be back. No doubt about it. We got nowhere else to be.
Absolutely.